All right, so yesterday, this is a sikha, this is a speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which he gave in 1991. And it is about this week's Torah portion, and more exactly, this week's Torah portion it's reading and the Haftorah, the extra little bit that we read in the synagogue after the reading of the Torah, called the Haftorah. And usually it comes from the prophets, usually it's something from the prophets. But this week we read the story of Joshua. Joshua preparing to come to the land of Israel. And Joshua sent 2 spies. And therefore, we read that after this week's Torah portion, because it's also talking about Moses sending in spies. But says the Rebbe, that seems seemingly that's where the similarity ends. In the Torah portion, Moses sent spies and it was a disaster. And Yeshua sent spies and it was very successful. Also, we see other differences. Moses sent spies, he did it on his own. God told him, you can do what you want. Yeshua, the Rebbe said, we must say that God told him to do it. He wouldn't have done it on his own, especially after the debacle that happened with Moses 40 years earlier. Another difference is that Moses sent 12 spies, and he sent them in with great, did he say, with great fanfare, chose all of them. Everybody knew that they were going, and they went into the land of Israel. They didn't try to hide themselves at all. God made big miracles so they wouldn't be noticed. But the spies of Joshua, is they went quietly. He didn't tell anybody about it. When they came back, they also came back quietly. Unlike the spies of the scouts of Moses, they came back and they told everybody. Also, the spies of Joshua, they went secretly. Right? They went secretly. Moses went out in an advertised way. There was only 2 of them. Another big difference is that the spies of Moses, they scouted out the whole land of Israel. That was their job. They were there for 40 days in Israel. The spies of Joshua, they went only to Jericho, and they didn't really even scout out Jericho. Immediately, they had to run away from their enemies, and they had to hide. So they were barely there for 1 day. But the spies, the biggest difference is the spies of Moses did not succeed, and those of Joshua did succeed. So the Rebbe explains like this. And I'll say this sort of quickly because I want to make progress. The big difference is that Moses sent the spies in to the land of Israel, the scouts, in order just to come back with a good report and encourage the Jews about how good the land was and to direct them where they should settle and where they should go. It wasn't for conquering the land. They were sure that God was going to help them and they would conquer the land. There was no problem. So Moses did not send his scouts in order for strategic purposes, for purposes of war and conquering, but rather for purposes of just surveying the land of Israel to know where to go, which is not the case of, therefore that's why they went in, and they didn't hide themselves at all. They went in a very revealed way, the spies of Moses, and even to the point where people said, hey, look at those little grasshoppers there. Right? They were so small, the inhabitants were huge giants, which is not the case though of Joshua. Joshua sent them in quietly, hiding, because he sent them in order to know how to conquer the land. That's what he said. Moses sent them in Lokade, not in order to know how to conquer the land easily, but the sort of bureau just to let everybody know how good the land of Israel was. how the people that live there are big. You see that it's a very successful and a very healthy country. There's some countries that the people who live there are very big. They're very nice. It's a wonderful place. You go to the land of Israel, your children will grow up. They'll be big and strong, and the land will be strong. That was the thing. This whole idea to know how good the land was, this was done by these scouts that Moses sent in. And the scouts came back and they said, Banu el Oretz, we came for the land, and the land you sent was Zavat Chalav Davash, and you were right. It's a land that's flowing milk and honey, and this is its fruits. Some people say milk and honey. I mean, we learned in Chassidut, this means Chesed and Gevurah, but it says milk and honey, and there's so much plenty there that even like the crops are great, and there's so much food and everything for the animals and everything, that even the milk and honey is successful. What's the milk? The milk is the cows. The cows are eating so much, such a healthy food, that even the milk is flowing. And the honey, some people say that honey means the honey from the fruits, the sweetness of the fruits. In any case, it's a land of plenty. It's a land that's how do you say, healthy and bountiful. They came back, the scouts of Moses, they came back and they said what the land was very great. And if they did not add on the things which they say, but the people are very strong and we cannot take over, they would have gone immediately with great joy, and they should have just stopped. They should have just said the land is very great, but the scouts of Moses, they said, but what? There's big giants there and we can't take them over. That made everybody afraid. But the fact is they didn't come over, they didn't come back. They didn't go in and they didn't come back in order to tell the people how to conquer the land. They were sure they were going to conquer it. There was no doubt about it. Everybody thought for sure they were, until they came back and lowered everybody's motivation. And they said, listen, you think you're going to conquer the land? Believe us, we were there. It's not going to be so simple. The people are going to be great. There's for sure we're going to have a lot of losses. The spies of Joshua, though, they were not sent in to see how good the land is. They weren't sent in order to bring a good report back. But their whole reason they were sent was in order to conquer the land of Israel. Because conquering the land by means of Joshua wasn't in such a high level like it would have been by means of Moshe. If Moshe would have gone in, there would have been big miracles. It says there was some sort of a hornet, a tzira, that would have stood on the boundaries, not going into the land of Israel, and it would have shot poison into their enemies. Anyway, God would have taken care of the enemies. But the people didn't have trust in God. Moses was sure, he sent spies in because he was sure of victory. There was not supposed to be any problem. When the spies came back, and so then they wrecked everything up. They took away everybody's certainty. Therefore, Joshua, 40 years later, when he sent in the spies, he sent them in with the idea that we're going to have to fight. We want to know, tell us the strategic way to do it. Therefore, they had to have something natural. Therefore, Joshua had to send in spies in order to know. They had to have what do they call it? I forget the word. Modein. Anyway, they have to have information. I don't know today, I'm forgetting words. They had to have information on intelligence. Oh, they have to have intelligence and know, right, what's going on inside, whether it's intelligence because they have, spies inside, or they send spies outside, or they have some way of looking over, they have like anyone who comes to fight against a foreign nation, you have to have spies, you have to know who you're fighting against. So the purpose of the spies of Moses was just to find out how good the land was. But the purpose of the spies, they were sure there wasn't going to be any trouble until the spies came back and wrecked it up. The spies that Joshua sent in, they were in order to conquer the land. They were sure there was going to be trouble. So they sent in these spies. According to this, now we can understand the differences between the spies of Moses and the spies of Joshua. Bismano shel Moshe, in the time of Moses, before Moses sent the spies in, God didn't command them to do it. Because the main reason to send the spies is because the reason they usually send spies, and you have to have, how do you say, intelligence in what do you call it? Anyway, you have to have spies and people giving back information from the is in an enemy country. So therefore, you don't really need spies to take over the land of Israel. God said, "I'll do the whole thing." Because the Jewish people said, "We want to know more about the land of Israel before we're going in." That the Jewish people wanted to send land. They wanted to send spies into Israel just to know how good it was, to give them a little more encouragement. No, God said, "You really need a thing like that? Come on, you don't need it." But Moses said, "Listen, it's necessary to make the people happy. Listen, they're really uptight, the people. You have to sort of understand them. I'll send in spies. They'll come back with a good report, and then everyone will be happy to go in." So Moses said, "Okay." He thought, they'll come back and they'll see that there's nothing, that the land is beautiful. He thought that he would say, "Okay." Oh, I understand. I'm sorry. He thought that when the people would demand, Moses thought the people would say, "Send in spies." And when Moses said, "Oh, okay, no problem, I'll send them in," the Jewish people would say, "You know what? We don't need it. We don't have to do it." When Moses said, "Okay," and he saw the Jewish people are not going back on their demand to send in these scouts to praise the land of Israel. So then Moses asked God what to do. Should I send them or not? To see, only just to see how good the land is? God says, if you want to, you can do it. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm leaving it up to you. God said, "Listen, as far as I'm concerned, it's not forbidden, but it's also not necessary. You don't have to send to see how good the land is. That's what the Jewish people want." I already told the people, God said to Moses, I already told them that it was good. I will take them from the poverty of Egypt to a land that's good, flowing milk and honey. God said, I already told them this. Why do they have to send in these scouts in order to see if I was right or not? They don't have any faith in me. Nevertheless, Moshe thought, listen, I'll send in these scouts. They'll see how good the land is. When the shepherd of the Jewish people, Moses, saw Rav Hirgish at the Tzorech Shalaim Lishmo Derech Tiva Oretz. He knew these people they were really uptight. They really didn't believe in God. Okay, so you didn't believe in God. It's no sin not to believe in God. They have a reason why. They don't know what's going to be, how good the land is going to be. I'll send them back a good report, and then they'll know that God is true and I'm true, and that they have nothing to worry about, and I'm only thinking about their own good. Then they'll be really happy, and they'll come into land with a happy feeling. And therefore it says, therefore God said, okay, send anashim. God said, send people. He didn't say send spies. Viaturu, and scout out. He didn't say yachperu. He didn't say to spy out the land of Canaan, like I'm giving to the Jewish people. Each and every one, send 12 representatives, each one from his own tribe. That since I'm coming to see how good the land is, in order to make the Jewish people happy, so Yalu Bochefetz Gadol, so the Jewish people will come into the land with a tremendous desire, a tremendous positivity, that they were going to take over this is the promised land that God promised them. So therefore, God said, you know what? Listen, send 12. Each tribe will send his own leader. Why? Because Shekol Echad Me'em, each one makir tchunot v'tzorichim v'doeg b'miyuchad lishtadel letovatom shel shivto. Why were there 12 tribes? The 12 tribes came from the 12 sons of Jacob, and each one had a different personality. each tribe was, how do you say, had its own different personality, right? Of course, everyone was different within the personalities. But we see that Frenchmen are different than Englishmen. Englishmen are different than Italians. Italians are different than Spanish people. Spanish people are different than Russians. Russians are different than and different races. You know, the Indians are different than the Negroes. And the Negroes are different than the Jews. And the Jews are different from each race, each nationality. They have their own general sort of nature. Generals within them, of course, every person is different. Every human is different. But they are the one, that's why there was the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes, each one had his own general nature. I don't know exactly what it was, but this likes a spicy food, this likes the sweet food. Anyway, each had its own nature. So therefore, each tribe, Moses says, send the representative from each tribe, so he'll be able to return back a good report according to the nature of that tribe. Sheyiru b'mo'einav, that he will see the goodness of the land of Israel, that how it's divided into the 12 tribes. Kasher, each one of the tribes will hear from his representative that the whole entire land of Israel is good. Therefore, everyone will be happy, and they'll all come together. They'll know that it's good for me, and it's good for all the others, and they'll all be happy, and it'll be wonderful, and they'll go in. Of course, it came out exactly the opposite. Because of this, therefore it says all the 12 scouts of Moses, they went scouting out the whole land to the width and the length, and each one didn't go to his own portion. The land of Israel was divided up into 12 different tribes. So each one could have gone to his own area and come back. They all went together. Big waste of time. They didn't have to do that. Each tribe only had to show his place where his tribe was going to live, his leader, where he was going to live, to scout it out and say, wow, it was a wonderful place. I never saw such a wonderful place. Are we lucky to have such another place? What do we care about? I don't care about the other lands, right? Each tribe has wonderful, listen to the other guy, what he has to say. No, they all went along, they all 12 of these representatives, they all went together. The Kivan Sheshlichos, that sense that these 12 leaders of the Jews was in order that each one should give a testimony to his individual tribe, what he saw with his own eyes. So therefore, all the time that the land of Israel was not divided in actuality to the 12 different tribes, as they didn't know exactly where exactly was his portion. This was going to be right before they went into the land of Israel, would be decided. Ach b'goral. So therefore, what? This is only after Joshua divided it up. So therefore, all the 12 tribes, they had to go to the whole entire land of Israel. By means of that, everyone would know that every portion that there was would be good. So according to this, is not exactly like what I said. It's not that everybody knew where their portion was. The Rebbe said they didn't know where their portion was, and therefore everyone went together to show that the whole land of Israel was good. Lochi, and therefore it was advertised. Bepirsum, they didn't try to hide themselves, not from the Jews and not from the inhabitants of the land of Israel. And obviously, it wasn't like the spies of Joshua that he sent in secret. Even since that the whole purpose of the spies, the scouts of Moses, was to tell the Jewish people how good the land was and to make everybody happy. But what? It's even regarding to the non-Jews that were living, the Canaanites that were living in the land of Canaan. Not only that the Jews, these scouts, did not do anything to hide themselves or to disguise themselves or camouflage themselves like these scouts that Joshua sent. That the spies of Joshua, they disguised themselves to mingle among the people so that they will know what everyone is saying about the Jews. They knew the Jews were outside of their boundaries. Because they were not, the spies of Moses were not there to spy out. They were just there to scout, to survey. Lo chashashu la'orer tesumas leiv liyoshvei ha'oretz al yedei halichasam yachad. Therefore, because they knew that God was going to take over the land for them, so they weren't afraid. They weren't afraid, and they didn't think that the non-Jews would also suspect them, because their purpose was not to make war. Their purpose was just to come and settle. The purpose of the spies of Moses was only just to scout out the land of Israel and to see the whole entire land. Because God was going to conquer the land, and it would be unnatural. Also, the shlichus, that this the mission that they had, and the going of the spies of Moses, it wasn't in a natural way. They weren't worried at all about anything, any natural danger. They weren't worried, which is not the case. The spies that Joshua sent, he sent them in order to fight how to make a war. He only sent 2, not 12. And he didn't send the highest people of Israel. It doesn't even say who they were. Oh, that was another difference. By Joshua, it doesn't say who they were. Kavan since that the necessity of having 12 was in order to tell all the individual 12 tribes how good the land was. Therefore, you had to have 12. But in order just to spy out and to find out where the weak places were and what the people are worried about, in order to do that, all you had to have is 2 people. It's better to send 2 so that they wouldn't be noticed. And just regular, normal people. They didn't have to be big leaders of the, it says that Pinchas was one of them. Cheresh Davka, they sent them quietly so that nobody should know that they're being sent in order to conquer the land. So it ended up that they came and they hid in a hotel. There was a lady, Rachav, she took them into the hotel. And she said, Yadati ki natan Hashem lachem, I know that God gave you the land, ki nafla emotchem, because your fear is on all the people here. Ki namugu kol yishvei ha'oretz, because everyone's heart is melting in front of you. Yimas levavam, v'lo kama od ruach be'ish mifnechem. I'm sure that you're going to conquer the land of Israel, because they're not going to retreat, but on the other hand, they're sure they're going to be defeated. Therefore, as soon as they heard from Rachav, this lady that lived in the city of Jericho, and it says, by the way, the city of Jericho, it had all the nations that dwelled in Israel dwelled there in Jericho. It was like a central metropolis. So as soon as they heard from this lady Rachav that she was the head of the innkeeper, what everyone was saying, and therefore, they concealed themselves for one day. They ran away from the city and they hid themselves in the mountain for 3 days. Ad Shova wrote for him until the people that were pursuing them, they came back to Joshua and they said, listen, we were in the city, we were in Jericho, we were there for barely one day. And then we ran away and we hid up in the mountains because they were running after us. And now they gave up. And we know what's going on. God put the land of Israel in our hands because everyone's afraid of us. That's it. That's their shlichus has been, their mission has been fulfilled. Okay, what do we have to learn from this? Let's just begin the next time, and tomorrow we're going to continue. According to this, we have this big wonder, what's going on over here. It's explained in a lot of places that the spies that Moses sent in were very, very high people. Like it says, Kulam Anashim, they were all important. They were well known by all the Jews. Rosh Alpha Israel, they were the heads of the thousands, 10,000s. Shenivcharu Mikol Shar Ben Yisrael, they were chosen from all of the rest of the Jews. They were the best of the best. These 12 spies that Moses sent in, scouts. Shoya Bedriga, they were such a high level. They didn't want to. It says what? This week we finished learning in Torah Likuti Torah. That they were such a high level, they didn't want to bring themselves down to do physical commandments and draw godliness in this physical world. They wanted to stay in the desert specifically because they were so high and holy. They wanted to maintain their holiness. Torah, that learn in the desert, they could just sit and learn Torah all the time. That's the thing of being in the desert. They didn't have to deal with anything in the world. They didn't have to dig for wells for water. They didn't have to fight with their enemies. They didn't have to worry about, they didn't have to plow for bread. They had water from a rock and clouds that protected them, and the bread fell from heaven. Ad kedikach, to the degree, shegam achrei ached, after they sinned, it says, ein lem chelik olam haba. It says they don't have a place in the world to come. Why? Because it says some interpretations mean that the generation, they didn't want to go into the land of Israel, that they have no place in the world to come. Why don't they have a place in the world to come? It says, it was higher than the world to come. Therefore, it's not a reward for them to go to the world to come. That wasn't a reward for them. They didn't get that because that would have been a low thing for them. They were tremendously high, holy people. Their intentions were the best and best of intentions. If so, they were so best of intentions and they were so holy and so they were connected to God. Now understand, after they were so great, how can it be that it came out from the Meraglim, the Paul Mamish, there was only something bad? That God got all angry at them and he said, you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years, and he punished them. How? What happened? What's wrong? And what can we learn from this, me and you? As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Let's see what we got up to today. Okay, here we go. Yishlomer. Now we're going to do the Yom Yom. Today's Yom Yom. All right. Religious Jewish people, they put on what's called tzitzit, right? That's this week's Torah portion. The end talks about tzitzit. Tzitzit are these strings, right? And then can you see it? Here we go. See these strings here? There's the garment. Here's the garment. Here are the strings. This garment is worn on the body. Here, see? 1 second. See? There we go. Here we go. See, here is the tzitzit. Not a very good picture. Let's see. All right, anyway, it's worn on the garment. You'll take my word for it. Not very photogenic. Not much of a photographer. Okay, so these tzitzits are worn only on a four-cornered garment, and it is our custom that we wear a small talit on under our clothes. Some people even put it over a small talit, which is like about the measure of your body. Body of this. Smaller people have a smaller one, bigger one. And in addition to that, when we pray, we have a big talit that we put on, only for the time of prayer. That's what's called a talit katan, is the small talit. When we put it on the morning, it should be put on when after you've washed your hands, and only in a place where you should say a blessing. And the blessing is al mitzvah tzitzit. And there's another blessing which is said lit atef b'tzitzit. That's only for the big talit, which is big enough to wrap yourself in. Okay, if one may not say the blessing when putting on the talit katan, then before davening you say the blessing then. Okay, this is talking about people that aren't married, that don't have a big talit. But because if a person is wearing a big talit, then you don't say a blessing for the small one. There's saying a blessing on the big talit, that takes care of the blessing for the small talit as well. But unmarried people, that they don't, in Chabad, in any case, we have a custom that only married people have a big talit. So the small talit is worn, and you make a blessing on it in the morning if you don't have a big talit, namely an unmarried person. And if you, for some reason, you didn't make the blessing, right, you forgot to or whatever, then you take the small talit, you hold on to the tzitzit, and you can make the blessing then. But really, the blessing is supposed to be made in the morning as soon as you wash your hands. Have a good day with Moshiach. Now, God willing, 3 o'clock, we're learning Chumash.